Despite living in an era of abundant food options and widespread access to supplements, vitamin D deficiency remains one of the most common nutritional shortfalls in the world. A significant portion of the global population does not maintain adequate vitamin D levels, and the reasons are deeply embedded in how modern life is structured. Most people spend the majority of their waking hours indoors, away from the direct sunlight that the body requires to produce this vitamin on its own. Understanding what vitamin D3 specifically is, what it does in the body, who is most likely to be deficient, and how much supplementation is appropriate requires unpacking some distinctions that are frequently glossed over in general health conversations. We turn to Caroline Susie, registered dietitian and national spokesperson for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and Jill Weisenberger, registered dietitian and author of Prediabetes, a complete guide for the clinical detail. Vitamin D3 versus vitamin D2, why the distinction matters. Vitamin D exists in two primary dietary forms, D3, also known as cholecalciferol, and D2, known as ergocalciferol. Vitamin D2 comes from plant sources and fortified foods. Vitamin D3 is the form naturally produced in human skin in response to ultraviolet B radiation from sunlight, and it is also found in animal-based food sources. While the two forms are similar in chemical structure and function, research consistently shows that vitamin D3 is more effective at raising and sustaining blood concentrations of vitamin D and at keeping those levels elevated for longer after supplementation stops. This is why D3 is the form most commonly recommended when supplementation is indicated. Both forms are fat-soluble, which means they dissolve in fat rather than water, and are stored in the body's fatty tissues and liver, rather than being flushed out through urine, the way water-soluble vitamins like vitamin C are. This storage capacity is part of what makes vitamin D useful. Levels built up through consistent sun exposure or supplementation persist in the body for weeks. But the same property means that excessive intake can accumulate over time to levels that cause harm, a distinction that makes dosing more consequential than it is for water-soluble nutrients. What vitamin D3 actually does. The most established role of vitamin D3 in the body is enabling the absorption of calcium and phosphorus from food, two minerals that are critical for building and maintaining strong bones and teeth. Without sufficient vitamin D, the body cannot absorb calcium effectively, regardless of how much is consumed through diet. The consequences of chronic deficiency include rickets in children, a condition involving soft and weakened bones, and osteomalacia and osteoporosis in adults. Susie emphasizes that vitamin D3 is essential along with calcium for building and maintaining healthy bones, and that it also supports immune health and helps keep muscles and brain cells functioning properly. Beyond bone health, vitamin D3 plays a significant role in immune regulation. Weisenberger explains that it helps regulate the body's inflammatory response and enhances the ability of immune cells to identify and combat pathogens. Population studies and clinical research have suggested broader potential effects as well, including associations with reduced risk of respiratory infections, cardiovascular disease, certain cancers, diabetes, and dementia. Susie notes these associations with appropriate caution, acknowledging that while the potential scope of vitamin D's effects is wide, the mechanistic picture and the strength of causal evidence varies considerably across different disease areas. Who is most at risk of deficiency? Sunlight is the most efficient way to raise vitamin D3 levels, but a range of biological and lifestyle factors can prevent adequate production, even for people who spend time outside. Darker skin pigmentation reduces the skin's ability to produce vitamin D3 from the same amount of sunlight exposure compared to lighter skin. Age reduces synthesis efficiency as well, with older adults producing significantly less vitamin D3 from sun exposure than younger people. Geographic location matters enormously. People living far from the equator, particularly in northern latitudes, have limited access to the UVB radiation needed for synthesis for large portions of the year. Regular sunscreen use, while important for skin cancer prevention, also substantially reduces vitamin D production. Several medical conditions increase deficiency risk through impaired absorption rather than reduced synthesis. Weisenberger identifies Crohn's disease, celiac disease, and cystic fibrosis as conditions that impair nutrient absorption in ways that frequently lead to vitamin D deficiency, regardless of intake. Susie adds that a body mass index greater than 30 is associated with lower circulating vitamin D levels because fat cells sequester vitamin D and prevent it from entering circulation at normal rates. This means that people in higher BMI ranges may need greater intake to achieve the same blood levels as those with lower body fat percentages. Food sources and the role of supplementation. For people who cannot meet their needs through sunlight alone, food sources and supplementation fill the gap. The richest natural food sources of vitamin D3 are fatty fish, including trout, salmon, tuna, and mackerel, as well as fish liver oils. Eggs, beef liver, and UV-exposed mushrooms also contribute meaningful amounts. Fortified foods, including milk and cereals, provide accessible sources for those whose diets do not include regular fish consumption. For individuals in high-risk groups or those diagnosed with deficiency through blood testing, supplementation may be recommended by a healthcare provider. The right daily amount and the risks of too much. The National Institutes of Health Office of Dietary Supplements recommends that most children and adults between the ages of 1 and 70 get approximately 600 international units of vitamin D daily, while adults over 70 typically require around 800 international units to account for reduced synthesis efficiency. These represent the daily amounts needed to maintain sufficient blood levels for bone health and general immune function in healthy individuals under typical conditions. The NIH sets the tolerable upper limit from all sources combined, including food, beverages, and supplements, at 4,000 international units per day. Approaching or exceeding this threshold without medical supervision carries real risk. Weisenberger is specific about the consequences of excessive vitamin D intake: elevated blood calcium levels, kidney disease, calcium deposits in soft tissue, heart disease, and in extreme cases, death. Because vitamin D is fat-soluble and accumulates in the body, toxicity does not require dramatically exceeding normal doses for a very long time. It can develop more quickly in individuals who take high-dose supplements unnecessarily or without monitoring. Susie's practical recommendation is clear. Anyone taking vitamin D supplements should inform their healthcare provider, particularly if also taking other supplements or medications, and should not escalate dosing without blood test results confirming that higher amounts are warranted. Testing for blood vitamin D levels through a standard blood panel is the most reliable way to determine whether supplementation is needed and at what dose. For the large portion of the population with undetected deficiency, this single test can answer the question definitively and allow for targeted supplementation rather than guesswork. Given how common deficiency is and how consequential adequate levels are for bone, immune, and overall health, getting that baseline measurement is among the most practically valuable steps a person can take toward managing their nutritional status with actual information